Each year a video is released by the most competitive and prestigious surf server in the world, KSF, a list composed of only the highest level of records. Today we're going to take an insider look into the runs that shaped 2022, bringing surf into its most developed state in 18 years. Surf Pagoda was released in March of 2018. It was a short tier 3 out of 8 in difficulty map, with 1 being the easiest. It was also a linear map, meaning there are no stages or breaks from the start to the finish. The main reason this world record made it into the top 5 is because it was dominated by Levi. You're currently watching his first world record from May of 2019. If you've watched any content about surf, you've probably heard of Levi. Undoubtedly the most skilled player in surf. He's forced to defend his world record twice, against Orson and later Praga, 2 legendary surfers, and in both instances immediately reclaiming his title. This is part of the reason why Levi is so revered, his ability to quickly respond and crush his opponent's times regardless of who they are. And thus, the number 5 spot in this year's best world records went to Emil's 38.3, taking the record 8 times over the course of 3 days for a total of 0.4 seconds off. Emil is one of the few players that can contest Levi. Based on my analysis, this one turn at the beginning has a huge impact. Levi turns relatively quickly and loses some units as a consequence. This is because air accelerate limits your ability to turn. It's the speed limit that requires you to be smooth. So Emil turns just a little slower and ends up with 30 more units. And just a few ramps later, this gap has widened to 50. Emil maintains this 50 to 100 unit advantage for much of the map. It is extremely small differences, like the number and quality of his air strafes or improved ramping, that gives Emil the edge. This record was a story of nuances, minuscule changes that amounted to a big difference, as opposed to our next map, Raphaelo. Raphaelo by Crealington is a long map, tier 7 out of 8 in difficulty. Upon release, it was among the hardest maps in the game, so for comparison, the popular remake Mesa Revo has 20,000 completions on GFL. A tier 3 map like Global Chaos has 2,400. Pagoda had 1,300. Raphaelo has only 42 completions to this day, only the top tier of smooth surfers. The first surfer to ever beat the map would hold the world record for a year, Michaela. Michaela was the quintessential smooth surfer, long, smooth, and precise turns that prevent the vast majority of surfers from completing the map. This tight turn and head check is ultimately the hardest section, apart from maintaining enough units for the final jump. Michaela would lose the record to MBN before taking it back a month later. Another surfer, Paxton, a specialist and the highest ranked player from Taiwan, would then temporarily hold the record, until Lemix, one of the fastest rising surfers, sets his long-standing record of 120.7. Lemix's run is different in some subtle ways, with slower turns and what is overall a more confident run. However, the biggest time save is fixing one of Paxton's critical mistakes. At checkpoint 4, Paxton unfortunately moons, flicking too high and hitting his head. This doesn't kill the run, but it costs him the units that he otherwise would have gained back from gravity. As a consequence, Lemix carries those units and takes 0.75 off the record, a huge gap compared to those before it. This record occupies the 4th spot because Lemix destroyed a legendary surfer in their element, and because this run further established Lemix as a new force to be reckoned with. The gap Lemix created was sizable, but not bigger than this map, Lux Modern. Lux Modern would feature one of the most stacked lineages in surf history, legendary surfers from each era giving their take on the map. This was also a critical map in Caffrey's career, which we covered just a couple weeks ago, giving us the chance to dive deeper into the map's history. 2 OG surfers, Morning and Insane, are the first to run the map, with Morning hitting the first no-fail. For Morning, the early stages were pretty easy. He keeps some speed between stage 1 and stage 2, but stage 4 is where things get difficult. This precise flick into a small glass box in which you must keep your speed, a fast spin to head hits, board onto an awkward curved ramp and flick up, as well as another head check at the end. Morning makes a critical mistake in this run, tapping the spine of the ramp before boarding. But because Morning keeps some of his speed, he zooms into stage 5, as opposed to starting the stage normally. Stage 5 also featured a really difficult spin and board midway through, and finishing a run with all these obstacles was considered impossible. The impact of no failing into stage 5 was the defining feature of world record runs, shaving tons of time and making the stage easier. The next runner was Frag. Frag was another OG who actually went on to play Rocket League professionally and was part in establishing Trick.surf. Looks Modern was the first map he took this seriously, putting in 26 hours of attempts when he was only 14. In this run on stage 2, he hits a direct end. This allows him to fall faster and he completes stage 3 with relative ease. Later, he keeps far more speed into stage 5 than Morning, giving him a big advantage, for a total of 2 seconds off his previous record. But this was nothing compared to his next record in 2014, taking a total of 5.5 seconds off. But less than a month later, one of Surf's most beloved surfers would take it from him. Troffelcopter's 151.34. He does one of the first stage 2 skips, flying over this curved ramp that all other surfers had used, and despite a messy stage 3, he does another skip here as well, b-hopping on the spine of the end ramp. With an overall stronger stages 4 and 5, he sets a record that would stand for 2.5 years. Our next contender, Crashfort, was known for much more than surfing. Crashfort was the creator of SVR, the program we use to record high-quality gameplay to this day, and also had a bunch of world records, which is cool. Crashfort had a much faster stage 3, and was the first to use a head surf in the glass box on stage 4. But by keeping an amazing amount of speed from this stage into the next, Crashfort has the fastest stage 5 so far, saving over 2 seconds on this stage alone. But Caff's run is really where we start to see new skips come into play. First is the stage 1 skip, going directly to the 4th ramp, the first time this had been done in run, and Caff keeps a ton of speed into stage 2, which means by stage 3, he's already saved 2 seconds. He fully uses the box head surf on stage 4, causing him to fall faster and keep more units, and he's the first to ever do the stage 4 skip, not using the curved ramp below this head check, and attempts to do the first ever stage 5 skip. Rather than using this curved ramp and head hitting, Caffrey simply hits the edge of the ramp and falls down. This saves time at the cost of units, which brings us to the final record. The third best world record of 2022, Kusche's 134.8. Kusche performs basic optimizations on the first few stages, maintaining more units and taking lower lines, but more importantly, he does a new skip that saves almost 3/4 of a second by itself. Midway into stage 5, Kusche uses this anti-grav to launch into the air and uses strafes to position himself for a difficult board, getting to these ramps early and attempting the curved ramp weave, which he hits. With a strong finish, Kusche takes 2 whole seconds off the previous time, beating one of the oldest world records ever as we climb the ladder of notoriety and surf stardom. Tronic is a map we've covered extensively on this channel, and it is a world record dominated by Sinsa. Sinsa is by far the most legendary old school surfer, starting all the way back in 2010. While not nearly as skilled as modern players, he was way ahead of his time. This run you're watching is his 2010 record, even though it looks crazy as if it had been hit today. Since 2010, Sinsa has taken the world record 11 times over the course of 9 years, beating his own world record multiple times. This was his final record on the map, set November 9th, 2019. Sinsa's 33.4 stood for 2 entire years, but a few surfers continued to test the map. Finally, Cam, a specialist on the map, had developed a new route. On checkpoint 2, taking an entirely different entry into this skip, not only allowing for an easier drop, but keeping an extra 200 units into the next section. The first to implement this strategy was Pietu, and finally Marble on March 15th, 22, setting the final world record for this map. As soon as it was achieved, many surfers agreed it would be the world record of the year. It features the new checkpoint 1 strategy, a new spine B-hop, and a faster strategy on the fall section of checkpoint 3. But the major story to this record is why it didn't receive the top spot, an incredibly difficult route taken from a legendary surfer. The answer to this question is corruption. When corruption was first released, it was listed as a tier 1. This could not have been further from the truth. Corruption was the single hardest map ever released on KSF servers, over 3 minutes of high-level unit surf. Being the first to complete this map would be a huge achievement. The expectation was 1 to 2 weeks or more for a first completion, giving top surfers plenty of time to learn and practice the map. And then, just 3 days after release, Levi was the first person to beat Surf Corruption, taking just an hour in zone and 139 attempts to complete. It takes most people upwards of 20 hours and thousands of attempts. It was a sign both of his insane consistency and his ability to learn maps quickly. But this run was simply a completion. Just a few days later, Emil is the first to set a strong run, minus 9 seconds. It is because he is the first to do the major skip of the run, nearly 2 minutes in, skipping 2 entire ramps with this quite jank board and flick. The record then bounces between Ollie, Roldar, Levi, and Emil, and Batman. A coder who makes his own bots releases his tool-assisted run for the map, testing 2 entirely theoretical skips. The checkpoint 2 skip, avoiding 2 ramps, but most importantly, keeping a ton of speed, and tree room skip, which would obviously save a ton of time. This skip has been deemed impossible for humans, only done in segmented runs. And more recently, Emil and Lemix started experimenting with more segmented routes, trying to hit these insane skips. They both release unbelievable tasked runs. And then, Lemix hits one of the best runs of his career, taking 3 whole seconds off the world record. He does this by doing the first couple checkpoints as perfectly as he can. Any unit saved or generated in this section would carry into the rest. And Emil had actually made a couple of mistakes in his run, but Lemix wasn't done. He wanted to hit a run with the checkpoint 2 skip, which if he had hit would certainly have taken the number 1 spot. But that's not what happened. Lemix couldn't hit the run in the short period of time he had. Just 3 days after Lemix's run, Levi claps back. He matches Lemix's time and beats it, swiping away the number 1 spot on the most grinded and grueling world record ever. But this battle is far from over. It is almost guaranteed that a surfer will one day hit the checkpoint 2 skip and run, and open up even further opportunities for improvement. If you even remotely enjoyed this, go watch the rest of the list, it's amazing. This year was really cool and we saw some new surfers and maps. And if you're interested in more surf and source movement content, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching and good luck sliding those triangles.